Henry Mason, known as Henry to his friends, glanced at his phone after leaving a voicemail for Olivia, or Liv, as she preferred to be called, his wife of 5 years. He had just secured a lucrative service contract with a major corporation based in California, with offices across the country. Henry was confident his boss, Alex Carter, would be overjoyed, as this new deal promised significant growth for his IT firm. It would also mean a substantial increase in Henry's salary, leading him to ponder if it was finally time for him and Liv to start the family they had always yearned for. However, nagging doubts had crept into his mind ever since a recent camping trip he and Liv had taken with Alex. Upon their return, Henry noticed a shift in Liv's demeanor. She seemed distracted and had become somewhat irritable. His suspicions heightened when, upon tossing their dirty clothes into the laundry hamper, he discovered a pair of Liv's panties with something unsettling in the gusset. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was dried fluid with a distinct odor. It was then that he felt his world crumble, unsure of whose bodily fluid it was, but determined to uncover the truth. Knowing he had an upcoming business trip to the West Coast, Henry decided to consult a lawyer to explore his options. If Liv was indeed unfaithful, he believed their marriage would be over. "Are you certain your wife is cheating?" inquired Grace Bennett, a family law and divorce attorney recommended by a friend who had recently divorced his unfaithful spouse. "Not completely," Henry replied, "but I need to know for sure, and if she is, I want a divorce." "Well," Grace explained, "most divorces in this state are no fault, but you could file on the grounds of adultery if you have solid proof." "Like photos or videos?" Henry asked. "Yes," Grace confirmed. "I can have an investigator keep an eye on her and find out the truth." "Please do," Henry said. "What should I expect in terms of the divorce since she earns roughly the same amount as me with her teaching job?" "There's a good chance you won't have to pay her alimony," Grace explained. "You don't own real estate or have children, so everything will be split 50-50. You'll keep your retirement savings and she'll keep hers. Basically, it's a fair division of assets. If we can prove she's cheating, we'll use that evidence to ensure a favorable outcome for you. I'll start on the paperwork and we'll proceed once we have the evidence." "Okay," Henry agreed. "Go ahead and file. I'll be out of town for about 3 days, which seems like the perfect opportunity for her to act out." Grace called in her investigator, Ethan Wright, who suggested that Henry install a tracking app on Liv's phone. Ethan also provided Henry with a device to record phone calls on his landline and an audio recorder to hide in Liv's purse. Although Henry despised the idea, he needed to know the truth. There were other telltale signs as well. Since the camping trip, Alex had become even more arrogant and condescending, almost as if he knew something Henry didn't. Henry managed to get through the week and Liv drove him to the airport, giving him a kiss as he left. "I'll call you tonight after dinner," he said. "Okay, dear," she replied. "Have a safe flight." That night, when Henry called as promised, he was taken aback when Liv mentioned she'd been asked to work as a waitress for a party at Alex's house that evening. She claimed that one of the original waitresses had fallen ill, and Alex had asked her to fill in. Henry hadn't known about any party, as Alex hadn't mentioned anything. "He promised to pay me $150 for the evening," Liv said. "I could use the extra money since I don't start back to work for a couple of weeks." Although he knew she could use the extra cash with classes starting soon, something didn't feel right. "Really?" Henry asked. "All right, go ahead, but be careful and let me know how it goes." Okay, she said. "You know I love you, right?" "Yeah," he replied, "and I love you too. Good night." As he ended the call, a knot formed in his stomach. He contacted Ethan. "I just wanted to let you know that Liv's been asked to work as a waitress for a party at Alex Carter's house," Henry said. "Got it," Ethan replied. "We'll keep an eye on her and send whatever we find over to you." "Thanks," Henry said. The next day, Henry tried reaching Liv on her cell phone, but there was no answer. He also called the house phone, only to reach the answering machine. He couldn't shake the thought that maybe she had spent the night with Alex. His worst fears were confirmed when he received an email from Ethan that afternoon. "Liv spent the night at Carter's house and is still there," the email read. "She was quite busy last night. I've attached a few photos, but be warned, they're quite graphic. I'll provide a full report when you return." Henry opened the attachments, and his heart sank. There was his wife, once the love of his life, in compromising positions with Alex and 2 other men he had considered friends. The second photo showed her sprawled on the floor. His hands trembled and tears streamed down his face as he struggled to believe what he was seeing. He tried calling her phone one last time, but it went straight to voicemail. The house phone was no better, just an answering machine without leaving a message. He headed to the hotel bar to drown his sorrows. The following morning, Henry checked the tracker on Liv's phone and saw that it was still at Alex's house, indicating she was likely still there. Ethan confirmed this suspicion with an email that included 2 more photos of Liv engaged in a gangbang with multiple men, including Alex. Henry's son, Chris, and several others from Alex's IT firm were in the photos. Henry had once trusted these men as colleagues, but now he saw them in a completely different light. He didn't recognize the other 3 men in the photos and assumed they were Chris's friends. Henry finished his business with the California client, secured the contract, and then checked out of the hotel to catch an early flight home. Arriving at his house, he found Liv's car was missing. Checking the tracker again, he confirmed that her phone was still at Alex's house. He went inside, changed clothes, and called Grace's office. To his surprise, Grace was available and could see him that afternoon. Henry called Liv's cell and was taken aback when she answered, sounding out of breath. "Hello," she asked. "Hey, it's me, Henry," he said. "Where are you?" "I'm at home, just catching up on a few things before classes start," she replied. Henry was stunned by her blatant lie. "I see. Well, I'm done here in California and heading home." "Oh, good," she said. "I've missed you so much. Call me when you land, and I'll pick you up at the airport." "No need to bother," he said. "I'll take a taxi or something. Bye." He ended the call, wondering if she had noticed he hadn't said "I love you" or mentioned seeing her later. Shaking his head, he left the house and headed to Grace's office. Meanwhile, Liv stared at the phone after Henry ended the call. He had always told her he loved her at the end of their conversations, but not this time. In fact, he hadn't sounded very friendly at all. She had intended to go home after that first night, but being sandwiched naked between Alex and his son had felt too good for her to leave. She convinced herself that she deserved this, and that it would end once classes started. Henry would never find out. So she spent the next day and night with Alex and Chris. Alex went to work for a few hours on the second day, but Chris kept her occupied and even arranged for several of his friends to come by later for another gangbang. When Alex returned home, he found Liv riding Chris on Alex's bed. Alex joined in. After they finished, Alex looked at her with a wicked grin. "Maybe I should send your husband away more often," he said. "You do know I have classes starting up soon," Liv said. "I won't be available during the week. I can't do this while he's home." "Why not?" Alex asked. "Maybe he'd get off on watching you with real men for a change." Alex and Chris both laughed. "Well, I have to admit I've gotten hooked on you," Liv said, "but I still love Henry and don't want to hurt him. Maybe I can arrange for him to be out on weekends," Alex suggested. "That way, you can come over and play house with us." "That sounds like fun," Liv said, "but he's going to find out eventually. Henry's not stupid." "Don't worry," Alex said, picking up his camera. "I'll handle Timmy boy. Just one thing." "What's that?" she asked. "I don't want you having sex with him anymore," Alex said. "You belong to us now." "Got it?" Liv said, "but how do I do that?" "You'll figure something out," Alex said. "Make up an excuse like a headache or something." "Okay, I'll try," Liv said. None of them noticed the service van parked across the street from Alex's house or the mini cams attached to the windows, recording all of Liv's activities. Henry was devastated when he saw the evidence Ethan had collected. Along with photos, he had 2 SD cards full of videos featuring his wife performing acts with multiple men. Things she had never done with him. His love for her had disintegrated after witnessing her debauchery. Grace did her best to comfort him, but the situation felt hopeless. After 5 years, how could she have turned into such a, he wondered, and what had he done to deserve this? And Alex, once considered a friend, had turned out to be a betrayer. "I'll draft the divorce papers citing adultery," Grace said. "If you want, I can also file for alienation of affection against Alex and the other men. Those lawsuits usually don't go far, but we might get a decent settlement." "Do what you have to do," Henry said. "Just don't do anything reckless." "Don't worry," Grace said. "I don't want to bail you out of jail." Henry shook his head. "I won't do anything stupid. When can you have the papers ready?" "I can have everything prepared in a couple of days," Grace said. "In the meantime, try to act normally around your wife." "I'm not a great actor," Henry replied, "and there's no way I'm touching her again. Who knows what she's picked up from all those men?" "Tell her you're not feeling well," Grace suggested. "That should give you some time." "Yeah, okay," Henry said before leaving. Sitting in his car, Henry suddenly realized something else. He couldn't work for Alex anymore, nor could he tolerate being around the men who had betrayed him. He pulled out his phone, found the number he was looking for, and dialed. Thompson answered the voice on the other end. "David, this is Henry Mason," Henry said. "Henry, How are you, old friend? David Thompson, an executive with Empire, responded. Could be better, Henry said. Listen, is that position with Empire still available? Of course it is, David said. You finally decided to join an established company? Yeah, something like that, Henry replied. Some things have come to light and I can no longer work where I am. I'm sorry to hear that, David said. Is there anything I can do? Just give me a job, Henry said. I promise I'll put in the same effort for you as I did for Alex. Henry, assured of course, David replied. How does starting on Monday sound? Monday works for me, Henry said. Perfect, David said. Why don't you and your lovely wife come by tonight? Emily is making her famous lasagna. We can catch up and I'll go over the details of the compensation package. I'd love to, but Liv won't be able to make it, Henry said. Oh, what's going on? David asked, sounding concerned. I'd rather not get into it over the phone, Henry said. I can fill you in a bit more when we meet. Understood, David said. You know, Emily is a licensed counselor. If you're up for it, she might be able to offer some guidance. That sounds like a good idea, David. Thanks, Henry said. Great, David said. I'll give Emily a heads up. How about 6:30 tonight? 6:30 is perfect, Henry agreed. Thanks again. Anytime, David said. As they ended the call, Henry felt a bit of relief as he drove home. Upon arriving, he noticed Liv's car was still missing. He grabbed his briefcase and went inside, took a quick shower, changed, and sat down to draft his resignation letter. Liv came home around 5 p.m. and saw Henry at his computer. She approached him for a kiss, but he turned his head and she ended up kissing his cheek instead. Is everything okay? She asked, puzzled. Not really, Henry said. I'm not feeling great. Probably jet lag or something. I'll crash on the futon tonight. Crash on the futon? She asked. Where are you going? I have a dinner meeting, he replied. Are you meeting someone special? She asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Do you mean am I cheating on you? Henry asked, his voice cold. I've never cheated on you, and I have no plans to. Can you say the same? She recoiled. Does he know? She wondered, panicked. No way he could know. Out loud, she said, I can't. Henry remained skeptical. How was your job at Alex's house? He asked, trying to probe. It went well, she said. It was a lot of fun, even if it was a bit challenging. I'm sure, Henry said, his voice devoid of emotion. He glanced at his watch. I should get going. He shut down his computer and stood up without saying another word. He walked past Liv and went to the master bedroom to change into something more formal. When he emerged, Liv was sitting on the couch. How long will you be gone? She asked. I'm not sure, Henry said. Don't wait up for me. Bye, he grabbed his keys and left. Liv noticed he didn't kiss her goodbye or say I love you, which was unusual. After he drove off, she picked up the phone and called Alex, unaware that the call was being recorded. Alex, I think Henry knows something, she said, her voice trembling. Really? What makes you think that? Alex asked. He wouldn't touch me, she said. He was so cold and distant. He didn't even kiss me goodbye or say I love you. He just left saying he had a dinner meeting. Interesting, Alex said. Did he mention who he was meeting? No, she said. Alex, what if he knows? What if he's planning to leave me? So what if he does? Alex said, sneering. You can always come stay with us. And don't worry about Henry. I'll keep him so busy you won't have time to notice. But I don't want to lose him, Liv said, her voice cracking. I still love him. Alex laughed. Yeah, you've shown just how much you love him these past couple of days, he said sarcastically. That's not funny, Alex, she said. I enjoyed what happened, but I still love him. I don't want to lose him. All right, Alex said dismissively. Let him get it out of his system. He'll come around eventually. If not, we'll deal with that later. You're not going to hurt him, are you? Liv asked, fear creeping into her voice. Not directly, Alex said. But we'll make sure he understands how things are going to be from now on. You'll help with that? Liv asked, shocked. When the time comes, Alex said, you'll help us explain things to him. Remember who you belong to now. I've got evidence of what you've done, and it's in your best interest to keep Henry in line. You wouldn't dare, Liv said. Oh, I would, Alex said. I have videos from the camping trip and other compromising footage. You're practically mine now, so it's up to you to keep Henry under control. Feeling trapped, Liv gave in. Okay, Alex, but please don't hurt him. Alex sneered. Yeah, we'll see, he said, ending the call. Henry arrived at the Thompsons' large 2-story home and was greeted by David, who took the bottle of wine from him with a smile. Thanks for bringing this, Henry, David said. Come on in. David led Henry to the dining room, where Emily was waiting with her famous lasagna. Henry, this is my wife, Emily, David said. Emily, meet Henry Mason, our new account rep. Henry shook Emily's hand. Nice to meet you, Emily. Likewise, Henry, Emily said warmly. Please call me Emily. They sat down at the table, and Emily served the lasagna while David poured the wine. Henry took a bite and was immediately impressed. This is the best lasagna I've ever had, Henry said. I'm glad you like it, Emily said, smiling. It's one of my favorites to make. So, Henry, David said, I'm curious why you decided to leave Alex so suddenly. Did something happen? Henry took a deep breath. Yeah, something happened, he said. Please tell us about it, Emily encouraged. Henry shared his story, and David's expression turned somber. Damn, that's brutal. I'm really sorry, David said. I had something similar happen, though the circumstances were different. So what's next for you, aside from changing jobs? David asked. I've already seen a lawyer, and I'm filing for divorce, Henry said. My attorney says it'll be a pretty even split. What about counseling? Emily asked. Have you thought about it? At this point, it feels too late, Henry said. I don't get what happened to Liv. It's like she flipped a switch and turned into someone else overnight. I never knew she had it in her to be like this. How are you coping? Emily asked sympathetically. Not great, Henry admitted. My lawyer says I should try to act normal around Liv, but it's tough right now. I can barely stand to be near her. You might want to consider counseling, Emily suggested gently. I might, Henry said. I'll think about it. Emily is excellent at what she does, David said. I really think she could help you. Plus, it's covered by your benefits. That's a plus, Henry said with a half-hearted smile. Small laugh, but I'm serious. Emily helped me through a tough time before. I know she can help you too. He turned to Emily. Can you fit Henry into your schedule? Of course, Emily said. I think an hour a week would work. What do you think, Henry? Henry considered it for a moment. Okay, I'll give it a try, he said. David smiled and gave Henry a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Good choice. I'll make sure you get the time you need for counseling. Work it out with Emily and let me know if you need anything else. Thanks, Henry said. I will. Now, if you don't mind, Henry and I need to discuss your new job, David said, gesturing towards his office. Not at all, Emily said with a smile. I'm looking forward to working with you too, Henry. Thank you, Henry said as he followed David to the office. They spent the next 2 hours discussing his new role and the transition. By the time they finished, Henry felt like he was regaining control over his life. After shaking David's hand, Henry headed back home. It was around 10 p.m. when he pulled into his driveway. He saw the lights on in the apartment and hoped Liv was alone. He went inside to find her on the couch. So, how did your meeting go? She asked. It went well, Henry said curtly. I'm heading to bed now. Good night. He went into the second bedroom where his computer was set up and started to undress. Liv followed him to the door. Are you sleeping in here now? She asked. Yes, Henry said. I'm still not feeling well, so I'll take the futon. Is that a problem? Oh no, she said, her tone a bit disappointed. I was hoping we could, spend some time together. You've been gone for 3 days. I'm not up for it tonight, Henry said, though the thought of being physically close to her made him uneasy. Maybe tomorrow. We'll see. Liv nodded and left, puzzled. As Henry started his night routine, he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. The next morning, he got up, waited for Liv to grab his resignation letter, and made a cup of coffee. He saw Liv's purse on the kitchen counter and took the opportunity to grab the audio recorder. He downloaded the recording from the previous day's phone call before heading out, leaving without a word. Liv heard the door close and lay in bed, tears streaming down her face. At the office, Henry barely interacted with anyone. He greeted his secretary and then retreated to his office, shutting the door behind him. He was packing up his things when Alex walked in. What's this? Alex asked, seeing the packed boxes. Henry pulled out 2 envelopes from his briefcase. One is the signed contract from California, he said. The other is my resignation, effective immediately. I expect my bonus and final pay, including any unused vacation time. Resignation? Alex said, clearly shocked. What the hell? Why are you leaving? Need you seriously ask? Henry asked. You really don't know? You think I'm oblivious or something? I found out some things and decided I can't work here anymore. I've accepted another position. I'll be out of your hair in a few minutes. Then I'm going to HR for... Wait, Henry, Alex said, trying to salvage the situation. Can't we talk about this? There's nothing to talk about, Henry said firmly. I'm done. I thought of you as a friend, but you betrayed me and wrecked my marriage. Find someone else to manipulate. So this is what it's about, Alex said, smirking. Your wife was more than willing. Don't let this ruin your career. Just go with the flow for a while. She'll come back to you once she's had her fun. Are you seriously suggesting I just accept this? Henry said, disgusted. How long have you been sleeping with her? The first time was at the campout, Alex said, grinning. The day you and the others were out skiing, she came on to me in your tent, told me I was bigger than you, and begged me to take her. That's about the time you suddenly had me leave for office business, right? You wanted me out of the way so you could have your way with her. Alex's smirk widened. Yeah, so what? Henry pulled out his phone and stopped the audio recording. It started earlier. Thanks for confirming everything, Henry said coldly. Now, if you excuse me, I'm finished here. I'll head to HR and then be out of your life for good. Henry said, grabbing his things. Wait a minute, Alex said, trying to stop him. You can't use that recording. We'll see, Henry replied. I'm done here. Goodbye, Alex. Rotten hell. Alex sneered. Okay, Henry said. You forgot something. He turned to grab a photo of Liv from his desk. I didn't forget, Henry said, holding up the picture. I don't want it. You and your son clearly wanted her so badly you can keep her. I'm done with both of you. With that, Henry stormed out of the office. Alex watched him leave, baffled. How did Henry find out about what had happened with Liv, he wondered. Wait, he resigned? Liv asked when Alex called her. Yeah, Alex said. He handed me a signed contract and his resignation letter and then just left. He knows something, Liv. I don't know how, but he knows. What did you tell him? Liv asked, her voice trembling. The truth, Alex said. I told him about the camping trip. You idiot, Liv exclaimed. Why would you tell him that? Well, he asked, Alex said defensively. He also left the picture of you on his desk, said he didn't want it. Great, Liv said, tears streaming down her face. So what now? Not my problem, Alex said. He's your husband. You handle it. Unless you want me to come over and, don't know, persuade him otherwise? No, Liv said, her voice cracking. You've done enough. Stay out of this. I'll deal with it. Whatever, Alex said dismissively before hanging up. Liv stared at her phone, crying. She didn't want a divorce, but knew Henry wouldn't accept her infidelity. Determined to salvage her marriage, she sat on the couch, her head in her hands, sobbing. A few minutes later, Henry pulled into the driveway. He saw Liv's car and checked for Alex's. Seeing no sign of him, Henry grabbed his box and briefcase and went inside. He found Liv on the couch but didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he went straight to his office, locked the door, and reviewed the voice recording. He found the recording of Liv's call with Alex and forwarded it to his lawyer, then called her. Hello, Henry, she said. I just got your email. I'm filing the paperwork now. Great, Henry said. When can they be served? If you'd like, I can have my process server deliver them this afternoon, she offered. Would that work? Yes, that's fine, Henry agreed. Thanks, he said before hanging up. He went to his gun safe, retrieved his old .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol, and set it on the kitchen table. He wasn't planning to use it, but wanted to be prepared for any trouble. Henry walked into the kitchen, setting his briefcase on the table. Liv looked up, her eyes red from crying. We need to talk, Henry, he said, pointing at the gun. Is that really necessary? She asked, glancing at the weapon. I hope not, Henry replied. I just want to be cautious in case your lover decides to drop by. My lover? Liv asked, confused. Don't play dumb with me, Henry said, his tone icy. I'm not in the mood for games. Sit down. We need to go over some things. Liv sat down, her fear evident. First off, Henry said, later today someone will come by to serve you with divorce papers. Liv's face went pale. Divorce? Why? I don't want that. I love you. Spare me, Henry said. I know all about your escapades with Alex and his son and the other men. I filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery. Adultery? She asked, shocked. You don't have proof. Henry smirked, pulling out an envelope. He dropped a few time-stamped photos on the table, each showing her with different men, including Alex. I also have video and audio, he said. Want to see? Liv shook her head, defeated. Good, Henry said. Considering everything, I've been more than fair. No alimony. You get half of what's in the bank. We each keep our retirement accounts, and you can keep all your personal belongings. I've already canceled your credit card and have a cashier's check for your share of the remaining funds. Plus, there's a restraining order requiring you to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. You have until you're served to pack up your things. You're kicking me out? Liv asked, her voice breaking. Basically, Henry said. But what if I fight the divorce? She asked, desperation in her voice. Henry laughed bitterly. I wouldn't recommend it. Think about what would happen if these photos and videos got out. Do you think the school board would want someone like you teaching their kids? I know I wouldn't. You wouldn't dare, she said, her voice trembling. Do you want to take that chance? Henry asked coldly. Liv looked down, unable to meet his gaze. No, she said finally. I don't want to lose my job. Right, Henry said. And there are a couple more things. You'll need to return your rings and give up my surname. Oh, God, she said, pulling off her rings. You've turned into a heartless bastard. Yeah, Henry said. I guess I have. But I need to know one thing. What made you go from being a loving, faithful wife to someone who sleeps with anyone? Liv looked away, ashamed. It all started on the second day of the camping trip. You were out on the boat and I was in the tent. Alex came by. I was naked, trying to rest. He came in, seemed embarrassed at first, but then, a guy with a bigger... Henry cut in, disgusted. And that was all it took for you to become a cheater? How many times did you sleep with him during that trip? Twice, Liv admitted. Once when you were water skiing and again when Alex sent you back to the office. Henry shook his head, staring at the photos. None of your lovers used protection, he asked. Weren't you worried about pregnancy or STDs? I'm still on the pill, Liv said, her voice small. That doesn't guarantee anything, Henry said. And you can still get diseases. Was that your plan? Oh, God, no, Liv said, horrified. Henry just shook his head, disappointed and disillusioned. You know, Henry began, throughout our entire relationship, I've been hit on by women who look like goddesses compared to you. I turned them all down. You know why? Because I thought I had a loving and faithful wife at home. I would never do anything to hurt her. But you didn't even think about how your actions would affect me. All you wanted was a big dick or 10. I hope it was worth it. Henry's gaze was hard, more resolute than Liv had ever seen. Get your stuff packed. I expect you to be gone when you're served. Henry, please, she began, her voice trembling. Can't we get some counseling? I'll never do it again, I promise. Can't you forgive me this time? I will never forgive you, Henry said, his expression colder than she had ever seen. From the moment Alex dropped his pants, you were willing, and I can't forgive that level of betrayal. But don't you love me enough to get past this? Liv asked, desperation in her eyes. Henry shook his head. No, right now I can't even stand to look at you. The sooner you're out of my life, the better. Now, go start packing. Whatever you leave behind will be either burned, thrown out, or given to Goodwill. Sobbing, Liv stood up and walked into the master bedroom to pack. Henry watched as she dragged out trash bag after trash bag. She stopped once and looked at him. Can you at least help me get this in my car? Nope, Henry said. You're trash. You deal with it. And remember, whatever you leave behind will be burned or tossed, including pictures and your wedding dress. You'd burn my wedding dress? Liv asked, shocked. My parents paid thousands for that. Well, Henry said, you'd better take it if you don't want it burned. Tears streaming down her face, Liv carried the bag out to her car and returned for another. Henry couldn't help but think, how much stuff does she have? A couple of hours later, Liv sat down, exhausted. I can't fit anything else in the car. Can I come back later for the rest? No, Henry said. You won't be allowed within 500 feet of this place. Ask your parents to come by for it if you want. I'll hold off on throwing anything out for a few days. Thank you, Henry. I appreciate that. Oh my God, she suddenly realized. What will I tell my parents? Try telling them the truth for once, Henry suggested. Tell them you cheated on me with my boss and others and that's why I kicked you out. Seriously? She asked. They'll disown me. Not my problem, Henry said. But it'll be worse if you try to paint me as the bad guy or sugarcoat the situation. You know how your parents feel about lying? Just then there was a knock at the door. I think that's for you, Henry said. Liv opened the door to find a sheriff's deputy. Olivia Mason? He asked. She nodded. That's me. Do you have some ID? The deputy asked. Liv showed him her driver's license. After inspecting it, he handed it back along with an envelope. You've been served. And there's also a restraining order requiring you to vacate the premises immediately. You can sign the divorce papers now if you wish. Liv took the paperwork, reviewed it, and signed it. I'll get this back to the attorney, the deputy said. You need to leave now. If you try to come back, you'll be arrested. Do you understand? Yes, she said, tears falling freely. She looked back at Henry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, me too, Henry said. Goodbye. Goodbye, she said quietly as she left. The deputy nodded at Henry before departing. Over the next few days, Henry's life was hectic. Liv didn't contact him, but Alex called twice, leaving threatening messages. God damn it, Henry! Alex's voice raged over the voicemail. I know you're there. If you don't drop this lawsuit, I'm coming over to kick your ass. Henry smiled and forwarded the voicemail to Grace, who alerted the local sheriff's department. Liv's parents called, asking if they could come by to collect the rest of her things. Sure, Henry said. Just make sure she's not with you. There's a restraining order on her. Okay, Charles, Liv's father said with a sigh. We'll come by when you're not there. When Charles and Liv's mother, Margaret, arrived, they packed up the remaining items and tried to persuade Henry to reconsider the divorce. Henry, she made a mistake, Margaret said. Surely you can move past this and take her back. She's crazy about you. What did she tell you? Henry asked. She said she messed up with your boss, Margaret replied. That's it? Henry asked, pulling out the envelope with the photos and SD cards. He showed them to Charles and Margaret. Their faces went pale as they saw the explicit images. I'm sorry she didn't tell you the whole truth, Henry said. As you can see, it was much worse than she let on. Oh my God, Margaret said, horrified. I had no idea it was this bad. I'm so sorry, Henry. I don't blame you for what you did. Charles's face was red with anger. I'm going to have a long talk with our daughter, he said. Have you done anything else with these photos? Not yet, Henry said, but I warned her not to fight the divorce. They commiserated for a bit longer before finishing up the packing. Half an hour later, they left, giving Henry a heartfelt hug and wishing him well. Later that day, as Henry was watching television, there was another knock on the door. Peering through the peephole, he saw Alex, Chris, and two of Henry's former work colleagues. Henry quickly went to his office, grabbed his pistol from the gun case, and dialed 911, holding the gun behind his back. He barely got the door open before they barged in. We're going to kick your ass, Alex growled. Henry pulled out his pistol, aiming it at Alex, which made the group hesitate. You're not really going to shoot us, are you? Alex taunted. You don't have the balls, do you? Really want to test that? Henry replied. Just so you know, I've already called 911. The police are on their way. If you're still here when they arrive, you'll be arrested for violating the restraining order. Alex, I think he means it, one of the other men said, glancing nervously at the police lights flashing through the window. Alex looked at him, then turned back to Henry. Just then, the sound of sirens grew louder, and red and blue lights flashed outside. Yeah, Alex, I mean it, Henry said. They turned to leave, but before they could, two large uniformed police officers were at the door. Henry lowered his pistol. Put the gun down, sir, one of the officers instructed. Henry complied, setting the pistol on the kitchen counter. Sir, these men are violating a restraining order, Henry said. They barged into my apartment and threatened me. I want them arrested. Do you have a copy of the order? The other officer asked. Henry nodded. I do, officer. He retrieved the envelope from the counter and handed it to the officer to review the document. After a few minutes, the officer looked up. You're right, sir. There is a restraining order in place. You three need to leave and not return to this property. Alex, Chris, and the other two men exchanged glances and nodded. Let's get out of here, Alex said. They left, and the police officers followed them to their car to make sure they didn't return. Henry breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to the restraining order, his life was finally returning to normal. He knew he would never forget what Liv had done, but he was determined to move on and find happiness again. Moments, the officer returned the order to Henry and addressed the four men. Turn around, hands behind your back, he ordered. The men glared at Henry as the officer cuffed them and read them their rights. Once they were restrained, one of the officers asked Henry, Do you have a license for that firearm? Yes, I do, Henry said, pulling out his wallet to show the officer his firearm license and NRA training card. The officer examined them and nodded. All right, he said. Be careful with that thing, you hear me? I hear you, officer, Henry replied. Thanks. The next 3 months were a blur for Henry. He thrived at Empire, finding the work far more satisfying than his previous job with Alex. Weekly counseling with Emily helped him address his trust and anger issues. He also joined a gym and began working out 3 days a week and started martial arts classes for the mental discipline. Additionally, he took a course on diet and exercise as recommended by Emily. The divorce went through smoothly, especially since Liv didn't contest it. The alienation of affection lawsuits, however, were more complicated. Grace had warned that some might be dismissed, and 2 were, but the case against Alex took an unexpected turn. After reviewing the evidence in Alex's financial disclosures, the judge ruled in Henry's favor, ordering Alex to pay $1 million in restitution. The judge had little sympathy for Alex. Mr. Carter, your behavior in this matter is beyond reprehensible. You abused your position as Henry's employer to deliberately destroy his marriage and his family. I also noticed that you repeatedly violated the restraining order. Therefore, I find in favor of the plaintiff and order you to pay restitution in the amount of $1 million. Your Honor, this is highly irregular, Alex's lawyer protested. Mr. Winthrop, the judge responded, this court finds Mr. Carter's behavior not only irregular but absolutely despicable. The order stands. When is this restitution due? Winthrop asked. Immediately, the judge replied. Unless your client would prefer to spend some time in jail for contempt. No, Your Honor. My client will pay as ordered, Winthrop said, sitting back down. Good, the judge said, and may God help you if this check bounces. He banged the gavel, ending the hearing. Alex wrote a check and handed it to his attorney, who passed it to the bailiff. After the judge noted the check, the bailiff gave it to Grace, who then handed it to Henry. To Henry's surprise, the check cleared, and he paid Grace her share of the judgment. While working at Empire, Henry was contacted by several of Alex's former clients. Word of the lawsuit had spread, and many businesses were reluctant to continue dealings with someone who had deliberately sought to ruin another man's marriage. Henry suspected that Alex's business would be in serious trouble within a year. During this time, Henry avoided dating despite being approached by several attractive women at work. He wanted to wait until his final decree was official before pursuing any new relationships. When the final decree arrived, Henry celebrated with friends from work. Part of the celebration included a lap dance from a very well-endowed stripper. A couple of months after the final decree, Henry received a phone call from Liv's mother. Henry, this is Margaret. Do you have a few minutes? She asked. Sure, Margaret, Henry said. What's going on? It's Liv, she said. She's HIV positive. She just got the test results. I'm sorry to hear that, Margaret, Henry replied. But to be honest, I'm not surprised. Besides, we're officially divorced now, so there's nothing I can do. She's not on my insurance, and I'm not responsible for her. I know, Margaret said. I was just hoping you might consider talking to her for a little while. Well, I guess I can, Henry said, but I'm not sure what good it'll do. Please, just come over and talk to her, Margaret pleaded. Henry thought for a moment before responding. All right, he said. I'll come by for a few minutes. Thanks so much, Margaret replied. Henry drove over to Margaret and Charles's house, and he was taken aback by how frail and thin Liv had become. As she approached him, he waved her off, and she, visibly disappointed, settled into a chair and gestured for him to sit on the couch. You look well, Henry, she remarked. Better than I remember. How have you been? Good, Liv, he responded. New job, new friends, and a fresh outlook on life. How about you? Not well at all, she admitted. You know I'm HIV positive? That's what your mother told me, he replied. I'm sorry to hear that, but honestly, I'm not surprised. Do you know when you got infected? I think it was one of the days I was at Alex's, she said. I had unprotected sex with several men that day. Does Alex know? No, she asked. She shook her head. Not yet. I need to tell him so he can get tested too. I'm sure he's not going to handle it well. Yeah, probably not, Henry agreed. Listen, Liv, I came here to hear your apology one last time, and I was hoping you could find it in yourself to forgive me for what I did to you. I realize now that my actions have wrecked a lot of lives. I could have said no at any moment, but I didn't. I was foolish and selfish, letting my desires override my judgment. And now I'm paying the consequences. I had the best husband and lover I could ask for, and I threw it all away for a fleeting thrill. I know you have every right to hate me, but I don't want to die without your forgiveness. Henry took a moment to consider her words. For the first time, she was acknowledging her actions and their impact on others. Sure, he could hold on to his anger and resentment, but what good would that do? It would only hurt him in the long run. Liv, he said, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I do pity you. You let your insecurities and your desire for attention ruin your life and the lives of others. I know you're sick, and I'm not going to stand here and kick you when you're down. I hope you find some peace before the end. Liv started to cry. Thank you, Henry, she whispered. That means a lot to me. Henry stood up and approached her. He gave her a quick hug and then turned to leave. Goodbye, Liv, he said. I hope you find the peace you're looking for. He walked out of the house and drove away, feeling a sense of closure and redemption. To his resentment, but he remembered his sessions with Emily. Harboring a grudge wouldn't help him move on. He nodded. All right, Liv, I forgive you. She broke down in tears as she sat in the chair. Henry thought about comforting her with a hug and started to rise, but she motioned him to stay put. Thank you so much, Henry, she sobbed. That means more to me than you can imagine. I want you to find a woman who loves and trusts you. Marry her and have children. I'm done here, but you still have your whole life ahead of you and you deserve to be happy. Thank you, he said. I'll do that. And if you ever need to talk, just let me know. Okay. She wiped her tears away and nodded. I will, Henry. Thanks for coming over and talking with me. I've missed you so much these past few months. I've missed the woman I married, Henry said softly. How are things with Alex and Chris, by the way? She shook her head. Not well. Alex has become very abusive lately. He didn't handle losing to you in court very well, and his business has taken a serious hit. I've noticed, Henry said. Has he hurt you physically? Not yet, she said, but he's very abrupt. Do you want me to be with you when you tell him about your diagnosis? Henry offered. And no, but thanks for asking, she replied. This is my responsibility and I need to deal with it. I keep thinking that if I had just told him to leave that first day on the camping trip, we might still be together. That's quite possible, Henry said. But I suspect it would have happened eventually. He'd been pursuing you for a while. I think you're right, she agreed. Listen, I'm really tired and need to rest before I head back. Thanks for coming over. It really means more to me than you know. You're welcome, Liv, he said. And remember, call me if you just want to talk or something. Okay, she nodded weakly. I will. Goodbye, Henry. She added, think of me every now and then, okay? He sensed a finality in her tone and worried she might be contemplating suicide. I will, he said. Just don't do anything drastic, okay? Okay, she gave him a faint smile. I won't. He stood up and walked toward the door. As he was about to leave, Margaret approached him and hugged him. Thank you, Henry, she said. This means more to her than you know. And it means a lot to me, too. You're welcome, Margaret, he replied. Keep an eye on her. I will, she promised. A couple of weeks later, Henry was on his couch eating dinner and watching the evening news when a report caught his attention. The bodies of a local businessman, his son, and a woman believed to be his lover were discovered earlier today. Police are investigating what they believe to be a double murder-suicide, the news anchor announced. Jacob Carter, president and founder of Carter Consulting, along with his son and an unidentified woman, were found dead. Authorities reported all three victims had gunshot wounds. Investigations are ongoing, and further details will be released as they become available. Henry was stunned. He called Margaret, who answered the phone sobbing. Margaret, what's happening? He asked. We just found out Liv's dead, she said. It looks like that bastard Alex shot her, then his own son and himself. Oh my God, Henry said. I saw the news report and was hoping it wasn't her. I'm so sorry it's her, Margaret confirmed. The police aren't entirely sure yet, but I'm pretty certain she told Alex about her HIV and he lost it. They're performing autopsies now. I'm really sorry, Margaret, Henry said. I want you to know I never wished for this. I know, Henry, she said. Liv made her choices and paid the price. It's still hard to lose an only child. I'm just relieved you were able to make peace with her. I like to think she's in a better place now. Let me know if there's anything I can do, he offered. Thank you, Henry, she said. Liv's memorial service was held a few weeks later, and Henry took time off to support her parents. According to the autopsies, Alex and Chris were both found to be HIV positive, just like Liv. The police pieced together the sequence of events. Liv had told Alex about her diagnosis and suggested they all get tested. When Alex and Chris discovered they were also positive, Alex shot Liv in the head, then turned the gun on his son, and finally ended his own life. Henry took a few days to grieve Liv's death, reflecting on the good years they had shared. One day, out of the blue, he received a visit from Hannah Brooks, a colleague from his team. Hey, cowboy, she greeted him. Care to join us for happy hour tonight? You look like you could use some company. Henry hesitated for a moment. He almost declined the offer, but then reconsidered. What the heck, he said. I could use some good company right now. Sure, I'll join you. Great, she said, smiling. Come on down to the hitchin' post after work. See you there. I'll be there, he replied. Thanks for the invite. As Hannah walked away, Henry thought to himself about how life keeps moving forward. Then, out of nowhere, he heard a familiar female voice echoing in his mind. Go for it, big boy. She's got the hots for you, the voice said. Startled, Henry glanced around but saw no one. A shiver ran down his spine. No, he thought, trying to shake it off. That can't be real? Or could it?